All right, we just wrapped up the Sunday action for week 12 of the fantasy football season. And with the playoffs right upon us, it's time to lock it in, get the guys in our lineup who are going to make a difference for us the rest of the way, or the guys we got to bail on so we make sure we bring home that fantasy championship. Let's give you my 10 lessons learned for week 12 of the fantasy football season. All right, lesson 1, Nico Collins back to being that guy. Man, Nico Collins was the #1 wide receiver most of the beginning of the season, just a blistering pace for him. Goes down in week 5 in the first half, misses 5 straight games, and then has a little bit of a comeback week last week with only 9 points, but a monster today, 20.2 points. And look, he's had 2 70-plus yard touchdowns, or maybe 65-plus yard touchdowns called back in each of these 2 games. Started off the game last week against Dallas, should have been like a 75-yard touchdown to start the game. Had another one called back again today, and that really just kind of changes the entire outlook for him. These would have been monster double-digit performances in both his games back, and that's on trend with what we saw from Nico early in the season. A 33-point game in week 4 against Jacksonville, 27 against Chicago in week 2. Nico Collins has been the absolute best fantasy wide receiver when he's on the field. Maybe Jamar Chase is catching up to him, but Nico has been absolute money, and Houston's now in a dogfight situation where they're going to have to be throwing the football and putting up points because they are struggling mightily. They are still in a playoff push for that division. Now, the bye is coming up for Nico, so that's less than ideal. We're going to miss 6 games for a guy who's been easily the best fantasy wide receiver, I think, when he's on the field, at least from a production standpoint. He's been lighting it up, but Nico Collins back into form, coming back in, and we really should be having much bigger performances these 2 weeks. Houston got to stop getting my touchdowns called back from my man Nico, but I think we can rely on him to be that #1 tier receiver down the stretch. All right, how about my man Chuba Hubbard? If you stuck with him, he has paid massive dividends for you. A guy who's easily in that running back 2 spot or even the flex spot in those lineups. He's been huge. The last 4 weeks, 21.2, 24.9, had the bye last week, and then a solid 15-point performance today against the Kansas City Chiefs, who ranked top against running backs in fantasy this season. So it doesn't matter the opponent. With Bryce Young back in this lineup, this team is able to run the football, and Chuba Hubbard got paid, and he's been tearing teams up. I think Chuba is going to be a crucial element to any team's roster down the stretch. You plug and play him in that flex position, and you are in for an excellent day. Even if you got to stick him in there at RB2, that's okay. He is definitely worth that kind of spot. Shoot, he might even be an RB1 with the production he's had this season. I mean, one really bad week 1, and then a 9-point game against Denver in week 8. Other than that, double digits all over the place, multiple 20-point performances. Chuba Hubbard, a total fantasy winner down the stretch. All right, lesson 3, if Justin Jefferson is going to be drawing triple and quadruple teams, Jordan Addison is going to keep feasting. His best 2-week performance so far this season, 15.1 last week against Tennessee, and a monster 30.2 performance against the Chicago Bears. His career best, 162 yards, 8 receptions, and a touchdown to boot. Addison has been awesome. He's been getting a lot of one-on-one looks with Jefferson drawing so much attention. And I think Addison and Sam Darnold have a really nice connection building. He is going to be a guy that you probably are going to have to start down the stretch. We've seen a lot of inconsistency with Addison throughout the year. Gets hurt in week 1, misses the weeks 2 and 3, 22.9 against Green Bay, then a 6-pointer, then a 9-pointer after the bye, 4.2, a nice week 16 against Indy, and then bad against Jacksonville, one of the worst passing defenses at 4.9. So there's been just massive inconsistency. He'll have a good week, he'll have a terrible week, he'll have a terrible week, then he'll have a good week. But 2 back-to-back really good performances, in 3 out of the last 4 at over 15 points and a 30-burger today against Chicago. I think Jordan Addison is going to keep producing at a very high level. Not the toughest defensive schedule for the Vikings either coming up, and Sam Darnold seems to have found his man. If they're going to keep treating Justin Jefferson like the elite wide receiver he is, Jordan Addison is going to be a feaster for you guys in that flex position or even at your wide receiver too. Jordan Addison skyrocketing to the moon. All right, my man Devon Achane is that running back we thought he had the potential to be, especially since Tua's come back. His first 2 weeks with Tua in the lineup, 23 points and 29.5. Tua goes out, his production and this offense's production suffers mightily. And since Tua's come back, he has been on a tear. 5 games now with Tua, double digits in every single one of these games. And he's had over 20 points in 4 of them. I mean, 26, 32, 10.2 against the Rams, but 20.5 and 20.6 this week. And he's getting it done in the passing game. Since Tua's come back, 8 targets, 5 targets, 4 targets, and 4 targets today. Had 2 receiving touchdowns against the New England Patriots. And the Miami Dolphins schedule is very, very favorable down the stretch. They aren't playing any sort of elite teams. They've already played Buffalo twice, and Achane had a 30-burger against Buffalo, so it doesn't even matter. Devon Achane, that top-tier running back now, we had to grind through it without Tua. As long as Tua stays in this offense, they keep throwing the ball to Achane. If he can stay healthy, stay on the field. We have had some injury concerns, concussion concerns with Achane. Keeping him out there, he is a consistent, high-volume producer for you at the running back position. Devon Achane, that guy this year. All right, sticking with the Dolphins, the massive impact that Tua Tagovailoa getting back into the lineup, and it's kind of changed this passing attack, is tight end Jonnu Smith. Now, this is a guy that if you didn't have a tight end, the tight end position has had a wide variance this year. It's really random who is up there at the top. There's been no sort of consistency. You picked him up on the waivers throughout this last few weeks, and he has been an absolute game wrecker. 28.1 last week, another 23.7 this week. He's had 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, 9 catches this week, just short of 100 yards, 6 catches for 100 yards last week. And it's been a positive trend. If they're going to take away the wide receivers, i.e. Tyreek Hill, even though Jalen Waddle had his best day today, Jonnu Smith is a large part of the offense, and he is a red zone target. Tua's throwing the short stuff to the tight end and his running back. This is something that can really flip a season on its head. If you struggled at the tight end position, Jonnu Smith is that guy for you. I think we're going to continue to see this high-level production from him. Easily been the best tight end over the past 2 weeks. And like I said, Dolphin schedule, nothing crazy hard there. It's favorable matchups all the way throughout the fantasy playoffs and the last 2 weeks of the regular season. So Jonnu Smith, a guy that you scooped up, has changed your entire setup of your team, really. If you can get these kind of point productions at a position that you don't really have had it at, it's crazy. And if Jonnu Smith is still out there, please go pick him up. I wasn't 100% sure after last week, but man, after 2 weeks in a row and what we've been seeing, and he wasn't terrible. 9.6 against Buffalo, 7.5 against the Rams, where they kind of laid a dud offensively. He's been involved since Tua's been back in the offense. I'm loving Jonnu Smith as a total changer for your fantasy team. Should have a great finish to the season. How about Buccaneers running back Bucky Irving, a guy that a lot of people liked going into the season to take that spot from Rachaad White, but the Buccaneers are able to support both running backs, but Bucky Irving clearly the guy in this offense. He's been on an absolute tear since week 6, double-digit performances, over 15-point performances every single week except week 9 against that great Kansas City Chiefs defense. A monster 27 points against the Giants today, 17.7 against the Niners. So his last 2 weeks, he's been awesome since that Chiefs game. Now I had to bye, and this Tampa Bay team, another team with a super favorable schedule down the stretch, a team that's in the wild card hunt, in the division hunt still this season. So they're going to be playing in competitive game scripts week in and week out. And this is a Buccaneers team that couldn't run the football last year. They were really inefficient, and Bucky Irving has kind of flipped it on its head. He gets a ton of touches and a ton of production, and he's really effective in the passing game. I mean, we're talking 7 targets, 3 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets the last 4 weeks. Those are the kind of numbers you want to see from that running back position. And if you can get them out in front, they have the screen game going. It really, really makes a big difference. And now with Mike Evans back in the lineup, it's going to even soften things up even more for this running attack of Tampa Bay. You think about Tampa Bay, you think about Baker Mayfield, you think about that passing game, but the running game has been carrying the Buccaneers this season. Bucky Irving, a guy I love down the home stretch. What a great pickup he's been. All right, maybe a lesson that we all knew that just really cemented it. Scary Terry is that guy, the number one tier wide receiver, a wide receiver one for any of you guys out there. He's been unbelievable this season, a slow start, but he's really come along with this Commanders offense. And even since the Commanders have struggled the last few weeks, Scary Terry's still putting up high production numbers. Now, he had the bad week against Philadelphia on a short week. 2 points, we're just going to forget about that. A nice 21-point day today, over 100 yards. Now, he did get a good chunk of that on the final offensive play, essentially, for the Commanders, had that big, long touchdown. But again, Pittsburgh 16.3. And look at his yardage totals since week 7. 98 yards, 125. Only 19 yards against the Giants, but 2 touchdowns in that game. 113 yards. Had the bad performance against Philly with 10, but then 100 yards today. We're just seeing consistency week in and week out from Terry McLaurin. He is lighting it up. I mean, one single-digit performance since week 3 and a ton of 20-point, over 15-point performances for him. Only had one game under 15 in that stretch besides the Philadelphia game. So Scary Terry, absolutely an elite tier wide receiver one for your fantasy team. And even with the Commanders struggling offensively, Terry's still getting his most underrated receiver and most underrated fantasy guy, I think, year in and year out. All right, another guy who's underrated year in and year out, maybe doubted, Courtland Sutton, since week 7, where he put up a goose egg, and it's like, what's going on with this Broncos offense? What's going on? Sutton over 15 points in every game except one, and it was a 14.8, so basically a 15 points. I mean, 17, 23, 19, and then 14.8, and then a 29.7. 2 touchdowns today, just shy of that 100-yard mark. This is Bo Nix's favorite target. Bo Nix can get the ball out quick. Bo Nix finds Sutton, and Sutton even had a couple of drops today that could have pushed him over that 100 yards mark, and we want to see more of him getting in the end zone. I think this is a good trend. 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. That's what you like to see. In this Broncos team, another team in a competitive scheduling and game situation, a soft schedule down the stretch, and they are in the wild card spot as we speak. So the Broncos are going to be playing meaningful football games against weaker opponents. They're going to be packing things up. It may not always look pretty with Denver in this offense, but we talked about Bo Nix last week. I'm talking about Courtland Sutton again this week, an absolute stud who gets slept on every single year, it feels like. I mean, Sutton was getting drafted so late in fantasy drafts this year. If you've read the Sutton wave, I think we've gotten over that hump. It was a bumpy ride the first few weeks of the season, but since week 8, been one of the best receivers in fantasy football. Courtland Sutton, a guy that's gonna get you wins week in and week out in the playoffs. Do we have a little bit of controversy in Kansas City? Has Noah Gray usurped the Hall of Famer Travis Kelce at the tight end position? I'm going to say not, but 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games for Noah Gray. This is a guy who wasn't really doing anything. I mean, 3.8, 0 points, 5.3, 10 points in week 7, but these last 2 weeks from Noah Gray have been awesome for him. He's got 5 and 4 targets respectively, only 23 yards last week, but 2 touchdowns. Has a great 66 yards and 2 touchdowns again today. And you watch this Chiefs offense, teams are cheating on Travis Kelce. We know Travis is having a monster stretch in the middle there, even though he started off slow. He was on a nice 20-point streak for us. Now it's turned to Noah Gray. They're kind of not looking Kelce's way. Teams are starting to take him away. And if we're going to find Noah Gray getting open, we're going to run these 2 tight end sets, use him out there. He's going to be left uncovered or against the worst linebacker or safety out there. And he's a reliable red zone guy. I mean, the touchdown he had today was a nice little big one too. Things you do love to see. I think Mahomes has found a nice red zone target in Noah Gray. Teams are going to cheat on Kelce, and I think he might be a viable flex option down the stretch. You put him in at tight end if you got to buy a bad tight end situation. And for a guy who's going to be super touchdown dependent, he's getting a ton of touchdowns. If you played Noah Gray this week, you probably walked away with a dub. If you played him last week against Buffalo, again, I think this is a trend that's going to continue for this Kansas City Chiefs offense. They find new and creative ways to get the footballs to different guys. Noah Gray, a guy who's ascending up the fantasy charts. I think Travis Kelce would be fine, but I'm a big fan of what Noah Gray's done the last 2 weeks. All right, and finally, Is it over for Christian McCaffrey after missing the first 9 weeks of the season? Comes back from the bye, has a nice little go there, 16.7, 14.6, only 7.8 against Green Bay today. Now, no Brock Purdy in the lineup, but it just didn't look quite as right. 11 carries for only 31 yards, and this is not a great Green Bay defense. Better in the run against the pass, 4 targets for 37. It's just nowhere really even close to 100 yards. Last week was his best week with 19 for 79. He was more involved in the passing game, his first game back against Tampa Bay, because Tampa Bay is just so bad against the passing team. But this Niners team is looking like they're going to quit, looking like they're out of it. McCaffrey had a back-breaking fumble. It wasn't really the decider in the game, but it definitely put the game away, and it just doesn't look right. This is not the Christian McCaffrey of old. He looks a little bit out of shape. It looks like his legs aren't quite what they used to be. I just don't feel that McCaffrey juice. I think the 49ers are in shambles, and their schedule coming up is a disaster, an absolute gauntlet of a schedule moving forward. Got the Bills coming off a bye next week. I just think Christian McCaffrey has been the worst pick. If you took McCaffrey in the first round this year, he's just going to let you down, and I just don't think we're going to see it from McCaffrey. Hopefully this isn't the end of him and he gets a bounce back next year, but I would not be relying on McCaffrey as that dark horse guy that you've held on to all year, that you traded for to push you over the edge in the fantasy playoffs. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you learn from this weekend? Who are guys you trust in? Who are you completely out on, as we are almost at the fantasy playoffs? If you haven't already, drop a quick like on this video, subscribe to the channel. We got all the daily fantasy football content you guys could ever want. I'm talking about your waiver wire videos, your must starts at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end for every single matchup. Guys to target, your sneaky starts, your boomer bust players for the week, plus the live streams, kickers, defenses, we got it all. Be sure to check out the content. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Check out the links down below. Again, like, subscribe, and share. We'll see y'all tomorrow.